Hi everyone, so now we're going to be talking about how to divide polynomials, and this is a little bit different than when we divide regular numbers. We can do it two different ways. We can do it with something called long division, like what you learned when you were in elementary school, or we can do it with synthetic division. I'm going to teach you how to do it with synthetic division for this year. You will learn long division next year, but specifically for this year, we're going to do synthetic division. I think it's easier, and I think that it'll end up being easier for you. So in order to divide polynomials with synthetic division, the first thing we're going to do is take the thing we're dividing by, which in this first example is x plus 8. So I'm going to take that x plus 8, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it equal to 0 and then solve it for x. So to solve that for x, I would just subtract 8 from each side, and I'd end up with x is equal to negative 8. Okay, great. I'm going to just set that over here because I think we're going to run out of space if I don't, and erase this over here. Okay, so we know x is negative 8. So that thing that x is equal to now, what I'm going to do is put it over here and then draw kind of a box that we're going to put the rest of the information in. And then that just kind of handles the stuff that we're dividing by. Now what we're actually dividing, that x cubed plus 11x squared plus 30x plus 48, we've got to do something with that. And what we're going to do with that is put all of the coefficients or the numbers in front of the x's in a row inside of this box. So I'm going to have 1, 11, 30, and 48. Now that 1 is coming from the x cubed, because if you remember, if there's no number in front of an x, it's really just an imaginary 1. Okay, so now we have this all set up, and it's really great and awesome. And now we're actually going to divide. So to divide, you always drop the first number. So I'm just going to draw this arrow down. What's going to happen is we're going to end up with numbers like right here, and right here. But for the first part, we just drop the number all the way down to the bottom. And then that number that we just dropped, so in this case the 1, is multiplied to the number that's on the outside of the box. So multiplied to the negative 8. 1 times negative 8 gives me negative 8. And with that answer, I'm going to put that inside of the box under the next number. Okay, so then we're going to add the two numbers together, the 11 and the negative 8. 11 plus negative 8 gives me 3, so I'm going to put a 3 down here. Then from there, I'm going to start the whole process over again. So we're going to do the 3 times that negative 8. So 3 times negative 8 gives me negative 24. I write it under the next number, and then I add these two numbers together. 30 plus negative 24 gives me a 6. All right, then we're going to do 6 times negative 8, which gives me a negative 48. And then we add these two things together. 48 plus negative 48 gives me 0. Okay, so then what I normally do is I kind of box off this last number, because right now it's just a set of numbers, but we're going to actually put x's back into it. But what I'm going to tell you is that last number, or in this case our 0, is considered the remainder. If you remember, when we divide numbers, we sometimes end up with a remainder, like a portion that didn't divide wholly. So that last number in this case is our remainder. When our remainder is 0, that means it divided perfectly or wholly. And so that's great. If we get something else other than a 0 in that remainder, then we have to deal with it. But for right now, we're not going to deal with it because it's a 0. So now we have to put the x's back into it. When we divide polynomials, that's basically like I'm telling you that I'm going to take an x out of it, or I'm going to take an x away from it. So for this first chunk, I started with x cubed. That was my highest exponent. But for my answer, I'm going to start with x squared because I took an x out of it. So I'm going to write 1x squared, because of that one right there, plus 3x plus 6. And this is my final answer. So notice that on my final answer, I started with the exponent that I told you I was going to start with, that x squared. But then every number after that, I drop an x. So it goes from x squared to x to no x's. And that's how we're going to always do it. So whatever you get as your answer, you start with your exponent that you want to start with, but then every number, it drops down 1x. And that's how we divide. Okay, let's try another one. So for the second example, once again, we're going to take that thing we're dividing by, which in this case is the 10x plus 1, and set it equal to 0 and solve. So to solve this one, we're going to subtract 1 from each side first. we end up with 10x is equal to -1. Then we're going to divide each side by 10 to get that x by itself. So I end up with x is equal to -1 over 10. Again, I'm going to write it over here so that I can erase this part so I can have some more room. Okay, so now that we know that, what we're going to do is take that and put it on the outside of that box. So we've got -1 over 10 right here, and then we draw our box. And remember, on the inside of the box, we put the numbers that we're actually dividing. So and it's just the numbers, no x's are involved. So it'd be 10, 71, 37, and then 3. Okay, so that's our setup. That's beautiful. And to actually go through and do the dividing, we're going to drop the first number. So the 10 drops down here. Then we take that 10 and multiply it by the number on the outside of the box, which is that -1/10. So 10 times -1/10 gives me a -1. Then I add those two numbers together. So I add the two numbers in the column together. So 71 and -1, which gives me 70. Then I start the process over again. So now I do 70 times -1/10, which gives me -7. Then I add the two numbers in the column together. 37 plus a -7 gives me 30. Then I can do 30 times -1/10, which gives me -3. Then I add the 3 and -3, which gives me 0. All right, and I ran out of numbers, so I'm done. I box that last number, which is 0, because that's my remainder. Still have a 0 remainder, which is beautiful. Then, like we did last time, we're going to add the x's back into it. So the thing I divided started with an x cubed, but when we divide, we're basically taking an x out of there. So my answer is going to start with an x squared. So I take my first number, which is 10, and I attach an x squared to it. Then it's going to be plus 70x, because I'm taking one x away every time, plus 30. And this is my final answer. Awesome. Okay, let's do it again. The third example. Again, we're going to start by taking that thing we're dividing by, which is x minus 4, setting it equal to 0 and solving. So to solve, I add 4 to each side. I end up with x is equal to 4. I'm going to attach that right over here. Erase this so that I have some more room. And then that 4 goes outside of the box. Draw the box, and then what goes on the inside are the coefficients in front of the x's. And remember, if there's no number in front of the x, it's a 1. So like the x cubed will be a 1, the x squared will be a 1. Then it's good. Then it'll have -15 for the x and a -12 for the constant term. Okay, there's our setup. Now to actually do it, we're going to drop the first number, which is 1. Then we do 1 times the number on the outside of the box, which is 4. So 1 times 4 is 4. Then I add those two things together. I get 1 plus 4 is 5. Then I start over. So 5 times the number on the outside of the box, which is 4. 5 times 4 is 20. We add the -15 and the 20 together, we get 5. Then we do, again, 5 times the number on the outside of the box gives me 20 again. I add these two things together and I get 8. Remember, we rounded a number, so we're done. But that last number is our remainder. So I box it off just to remember that it's a remainder. And this is the first time that we ended up with a remainder that's not 0. So I'm going to show you how to attach it to your answer. When you have a remainder of 0, you don't care about it. It's like, because it's 0, it's totally fine. When there is an actual number that's anything other than 0, we do have to do something with it. And I'll show you how to do it right now. So once again, your thing you're dividing by started with an x cubed, so our answer has to start with an x squared. So I'm going to have 1x squared, which I could just write as x squared, plus 5x plus 5. Now, if my remainder was 0, I'd be done. But because my remainder is 8, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say plus my remainder, which is the 8, over, like I'm going to change it into a fraction, what I divided by, which is x minus 4. And this is my final answer. So this portion just tells me that that 8 didn't divide beautifully or exactly, and so I had to write it in a fraction form so that you knew that there was a remainder. And this is our final answer: 1x squared plus 5x plus 5 plus 8 divided by x minus 4. All right, one more example. So the first thing we're going to do is say 9x minus 4, the thing we're dividing by, is equal to 0, and solve. To solve, I'm going to add 4 to each side. So we get 9x equals 4, and then divide each side by 9, which gives me x is equal to 4 over 9. And then I'm going to write, because I have more room here, I'm going to write that 4 over 9 outside of the box, draw my box, and then I'm going to put the coefficients on the inside of the thing I'm dividing. So 18, negative 53, 2, and 2. All right, so there's our setup. Now let's actually go through and do the dividing. We're going to drop the 18 first. Then we do 18 times 4/9, which I'm not expecting you to have this memorized by any means. You can plug that into a calculator, and I get 8. Then we add 53 and negative 53 and 8, which gives me negative 45. And that goes down on the bottom. Then we do negative 45 times 4/9, which gives me negative 20. Then we do 2 and negative 20 gives me negative 18. Negative 18 times 4/9 should give me a negative 8. Then we add the 2 and negative 8, which gives me negative 6. We ran out of numbers, so we're done, but that last number is my remainder. So now to write the answer with the x's, we start with x squared again, because the thing we divided by had the highest exponent of x cubed. So I'm going to have 18 x squared minus 45x minus 18. And then because there's that remainder of negative 6, we're going to say minus 6 over the thing we divided by, which is 9x minus 4. And this is my final answer, 18x squared minus 45x minus 18 minus 6 over 9x minus 4. And this is how we divide polynomials.